are listening to the Up and Under podcast, starting in 3, 2, 1.
Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Up and Under podcast. I'm your host, Hani. Joined with me, as always, is Zeeshan.
Yo.
Alright, man, so now that we're getting closer to the regular season, as our tradition, it's time to kind of go through and do our very early preseason predictions for each conference. Now, we've done this for the last couple of years. Last year, we did one, but again, we didn't review it just because it was the COVID season and we were just wrong all over the place. But we felt that now it's a good opportunity for us to kind of give you guys our predictions. Now that all the teams, the rosters are kind of what we're going to expect to see on opening night. And it's a good opportunity for us to see if we were right or not.
Yeah, exactly. Like I've previously mentioned, whenever we do these episodes, I think these are some of our favorite episodes to do, especially when we look back on how wrong we were. Because again, like, we're big basketball fans. I would say, like, we know the NBA pretty well. Like, we're pretty good fans. And we have a lot of basketball knowledge, NBA knowledge. But you just can't predict anything. It's impossible to predict what's going to happen. Even in a very quote-unquote predictable sport like the NBA or like basketball, it's still so impossible to predict what happens.
Yeah, especially this season where we're now coming out of the COVID year and we're going back to a semblance of normalcy in the sense that now we're going back to the regular 82-game schedule. Pretty much all the teams are going to be in their the home city, thankfully.
Well, I mean, it was only one team that was not in their home city last year, so Toronto's back in Toronto.
They are back in Toronto. But now that we're getting to some semblance of normalcy, it's time to kind of give our predictions. And we decided on this episode to start off with the Western Conference. And the West it's gone through some minor changes, but it's still the Western Conference. Like, it's still a very loaded conference in terms of talent, and like the teams are relatively balanced in the Western Conference. Like, it's gonna be a dogfight as always in the Western Conference, but starting us off with the number one seed, our prediction for this year is going to be the Phoenix Suns. They're going to end up with the number one seed this year in the West. Now, we're predicting around 55 to 60 wins. Last year, they finished with the number 2 seed, and obviously they went on that magical run and got to the NBA Finals. Unfortunately, they ended up losing in the finals to the Bucks. But the Suns pretty much brought back the same roster as last year that went to the NBA Finals. You know, they re-signed Chris Paul. They re-signed Cameron Payne. They added a couple of guys like JaVale McGee. And, you know, it honestly, that's really what the Suns were trying to do. Like, it's about running it back. Because when you go to the NBA Finals, when you were so close to achieving the goal that pretty much every franchise strives to achieve, it kind of makes sense to bring things back. But not to mention, I think, coming into this next season, they're now going to be a lot more experienced. They're going to be a lot more prepared, and I think another year under Monty Williams' system is going to make these guys better. And that's the one thing in the Western Conference that's very important, is bringing in that chemistry and that consistency that will win you games in the regular season. And we think that's going to be the case with Phoenix.
Yeah, like you said, the continuity of the team, right? And we're going to see, like you said, a lot of minor changes in the Western Conference. I think a lot of the teams we'll see are coming back mostly the same, with the exception of one team, obviously. But yeah, like you said, the Phoenix Suns last year were amazing. They finished as, you know, the second best team in the NBA. And this year, they brought back exactly the same team, basically. And like you said, they're just trying to run it back, see what they can do with this team moving forward. And that's, I think, the right approach.
I mean, the argument people are going to have is maybe the Suns did better than what they were supposed to do because of the COVID season. It can be argued that way, but at the same, because of obviously the injuries, you know, people in and out of the lineup. But you can make that same argument for a lot of teams last season. But I think the key with the Suns is that they do a lot of things well. They move the ball very well. They shoot at a very high level. They have a top-notch scorer in Devin Booker, a expert playmaker and leader in Chris Paul. They have a solid coach in Monty Williams. And they have a cast of supporting players. I really like Cam Johnson, and he really broke out in the playoffs. Mikal Bridges is another guy I really like. DeAndre Ayton is another guy who's, again, after building off what was a very good year for him, what's he going to do next year? So the Suns have a lot of things to look forward to, and we just feel the continuity and the experience coming off of the NBA Finals run will put them in a good position to have the number 1 seed.
Yeah, basically, like, they check off all the boxes, right, on both ends of the court. And so, at the very least, they're going to be a top, 4 team at the very least. Yeah. We should expect. Again, anything can happen. Talking about another team that kind of checks off all the boxes, at least in the regular season, our second seed prediction this year will be the Utah Jazz. We're aiming around 53 to 56 wins. Now, again, the Utah Jazz have gotten a lot of flack, especially Rudy Gobert, but there's no denying that they're still a top-notch team, especially in the regular season. Similar to the Phoenix Suns, they brought back basically the same roster that got them to that first seed last year. And it's just another year of building, another year of continuity, especially compared to the injuries that we're seeing with the rest of the Western Conference, as well as, primarily one new team with a completely new roster. It's just that continuity really helps, especially in the regular season where teams are trying to build chemistry. And if you already have that same roster and that same chemistry, you'll win more games than other teams in the regular season. And the Utah Jazz also fall within that category. They'll once again have a top 5 defense. Again, Rudy Gobert. He'll be probably Defensive Player of the Year finalist again. And especially now they have another guy who can kind of do a lot of the same things that he can do in Hassan Whiteside. And that was a big problem for them for the past number of years, that when Rudy Gobert would go off the court, they would completely fall off a cliff on both ends of the court. And now you have a guy in Hassan Whiteside who is a poor man's version of Rudy Gobert, but can essentially still do a lot of the same things that Rudy Gobert does. And then finally, they added a lot of great pieces last year to primarily help them on the offensive end. And that should hold up this year as well, especially if, for example, a guy like Mike Conley is able to stay healthy. Him, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Joe Ingles, Jordan Clarkson, all of those guys should help spearhead an offense led by Donovan Mitchell, who will only get better this season. So the Utah Jazz are essentially looking like the same team as they were last season. But again, top 2, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a similar situation as the Phoenix Suns. Like, they really much brought back the team that got them to this point. And again, same argument can be made. Were they a benefit of circumstances last year because of COVID? Maybe. But at the same time, Donovan Mitchell has clearly established himself as a superstar in this league. Rudy Gobert...
All-star. We'll hold off on the superstar.
Well, again, he's a great player, all-star level player. Rudy Gobert, Defensive Player of the Year candidate pretty much every single year, is the anchor of that Utah team in terms of their defense and the way they play offensively as well. Even picking up guys like Hassan Whiteside is pretty decent in terms of if you lose Derek Favors, you get a Hassan Whiteside who can pretty much semi-replicate what Rudy Gobert gives you. So that's not a bad idea. And I even like the idea of them signing Rudy Gay. Like, you brought up Clarkson, Conley, bringing up a Rudy, signing Rudy Gay with another, minor signing, but it also helps in bringing them another scorer, another veteran, someone they can kind of rely upon come playoff time.
Especially in clutch situations.
Yeah, Rudy Gay is a very clutch level player, especially through his time in San Antonio. He actually even improved on his defense a little bit as well. So the Utah Jazz, I mean, again, like they're just a solid overall team, and similar to the Phoenix, bringing that continuity and that chemistry year over year is going to be so vital for them and how they're going to win games in the regular season. Which brings us into a team that completely just changed an entire team. We're talking about the Los Angeles Lakers, and we predict them to be the 3rd seed in the Western Conference next year. Around 52 to 55 wins is our prediction. Now, last year they finished with the 7th seed. They had to play in the play-in, we all saw that. And again, it was LeBron versus Steph Curry in the play-in game. Great game, by the way. Very good game.
One of the top games of last season for sure.
It was for sure. But it was the Lakers really disappointed in the playoffs. Like, they got handled by the Phoenix Suns, and really exposed them. Now, LeBron was obviously injured. He wasn't himself. Anthony Davis, as usual, was hurt. But besides those two guys, they really didn't get any production from any other player, which pretty much opened Rob Pelinka's eyes to that roster was not good enough to compete at the level the Lakers want to compete at. And with LeBron going into his 19th year, they're going to have to make some massive changes. And they did exactly that. They completely overhauled their team And they added a lot of key veterans. They added Russell Westbrook is the most notable one. Carmelo Anthony, Trevor Ariza, Dwight Howard, Kent Bazemore, Malik Monk, Kendrick Nunn, Wayne Ellington, Rajon Rondo, DeAndre Jordan. That's pretty much 10 guys. I just named an entire roster for you. And again, there's a lot of veteran experience on this team. And with LeBron healthy, this team should be able to win a lot of games. Like, these guys know how to win, especially when you bring in guys like Rondo. Carmelo Anthony knows a thing or two about performing. They have some key guys here, and then also bringing back guys like Dwight Howard to rectify the mistakes of letting him go last year and not being able to play a reliable center is huge for the Lakers. And then they also brought in more shooting than last year. They got rid of some players that really underperformed, like Dennis Schroeder, Kyle Kuzma, KCP, Montrezl Harrell. Like, these guys, Marc Gasol, Andre Drummond.
KCP, I would say, was fine for them. I think that's the one player they're probably gonna miss. The rest of the players did not perform at all.
But he can be replicated by, you can get the production that KCP was giving you, maybe from a Bazemore, Malik Monk. That's why they brought these guys in, to give them that shooting, but to also just kind of replace what they lost, which in reality wasn't much, because those guys weren't really doing much for you anyways. And even with more talent on this team, this Laker team will be able to rest LeBron and AD, which is so beneficial for them, because LeBron's in year 19, and over the last couple of seasons, we've seen that his body isn't really holding up as we've normally seen him throughout his career. And then Anthony Davis, he's been injury plagued his whole career, so this guy needs rest, and these guys need to be available in the playoffs. So, long story short, the Lakers completely changed their team, but it's a team that's definitely better than last year and will definitely be competitive in the Western Conference.
I mean, it's arguably the most intriguing team in the league, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of boom or bust potential, like we've previously mentioned.
Yeah, it's the retirement home, pretty much.
Yeah, in previous episodes. However, again, like you said, I think the issues with the Lakers have kind of been overstated. First, it was the fact that they had no shooting, which they didn't until Rob Pelinka addressed that. And then there's the issue of, it's a very veteran team. But if you look at the rest of the teams, for example, like finals teams or championship teams of the past, the Lakers are pretty much on par in terms of the age. Why? Because they have guys like Talen Horton-Tucker, Malik Monk, Kendrick Nunn, who kind of even out the age balance. So those guys in particular will be looked at to, be very involved in the offense and defense and to pick up the production with guys like Melo, Ariza, Dwight Howard on the tail ends of their careers. And then the biggest point of emphasis for the Lakers, I think, from this offseason is the Russell Westbrook trade. They got him in there to do, like you said, give LeBron and AD some much-needed rest, because they did not have that last season. And, they're looking for guys like Kyle Kuzma and Dennis Schroeder to, do that, which they did not do. Russell Westbrook, we know at least he can carry a team. Can he carry a team to a top 3 seed like a LeBron James or James Harden or something? No, he can't. But it's not like they don't have LeBron or AD. They still have them there when they need to. But Russell Westbrook will be able to fill in the rest of the gaps, and that's the biggest reason why they got him.
It's actually kind of smart when you think about it. You have Russell Westbrook starting, and you have Rondo off the bench. Not a bad idea. Now you get the offensive scoring from Westbrook, and then you get the leadership from Rondo off the bench. So it's not like people really, and including myself, I really doubted Rob Pelinka, but I'm kind of understanding. The guy kind of knows what he's doing, for the most part. Especially this roster, he did a pretty decent job in terms of flipping what was a very horrible Lakers roster into a semi-decent one for this upcoming season.
Well, again, with the Westbrook trade, the on-court fit between the big three will, I think, be an issue.
It's a risk.
It's a risk or a question. But the main thing is we know their minutes are going to be stacked anyway. So throughout the regular season, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. In the playoffs, we'll see what happens. But because LeBron James is on this team, you're allowed to bench a superstar like Russell Westbrook if you need to. And no problems will happen because Le GM is on the team, right? So, exactly. Moving on to our 4th seed, we have the Denver Nuggets finishing with around 52 to 55 wins, same as the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, similar to, I think, the first 2 seeds that we mentioned, Utah and Phoenix, it's another year of primarily the same team. The only small change in this Denver Nuggets team is that they replaced Paul Millsap with Jeff Green, basically. The issue for the Nuggets is that they'll be missing Jamal Murray for at least the first chunk of the season. He did tear his ACL in April, so it'll take some time for him to get back to the court. And then obviously we know he's gonna have some rust. And so we might not even see Jamal Murray at his peak for this whole season, which really does hurt the Denver Nuggets because their championship window is likely right now. In the coming years, they're going to have to pay their players, right? Michael Porter Jr., they'll have to pay some of their other players. And, guys like Will Barton and whatnot are still on relatively cheaper contracts. So their best chance at winning a championship is arguably right now. And with Jamal Murray being out, that's definitely going to hurt their chances. In terms of the regular season, though, with Jamal Murray's injury, that provides more opportunity to one Michael Porter Jr. And with the season he had last year, everyone expects him to probably be at least maybe a fringe all-star caliber player. It's definitely within possibility this season based on how he played last season. So Michael Porter Jr. will definitely be able to help out their MVP, Nikola Jokic. And that's where my main point is. Having the MVP on your team, you'll still always be a good team. Nikola Jokic will push them through the regular season. He'll do what he has to do. He showed that in the previous years that he's capable of carrying a team. But then on top of that, with Nikola Jokic and MPJ being there, Mike Malone, his system really works overall for a team. And they're able to get very good production from guys like Monte Morris, from Jermichael Green. Austin Rivers came in last year at the end of the season and was great for them. Will Barton, the list goes on. The Denver Nuggets are a very good overall team, not just a team led by two great players in MPJ and Nikola Jokic. So the Denver Nuggets, as a result, I think should be still very good. Obviously, they're going to miss Jamal Murray, but they still should be a very good team.
Yeah, I think, again, like you kind of nailed it when it's similar to what we're talking about with Utah and Phoenix, where, again, it's pretty much the same team. Now, the only difference is Jamal Murray isn't going to be there for that first chunk of the season, which definitely will hurt them a little bit and that's why we kind of bumped them down. But when you're talking about, the young guys to step up, like Michael Porter Jr. was already a huge name, but a name you didn't even mention was Aaron Gordon, who they still have on the team. Aaron Gordon, they traded for him at the trade deadline, and he performed very well for Denver. And I think with another year under Mike Malone's system, another year of being acclimated, he should be even better for them.
And again, he's going to be a free agent. So like I was saying, the Denver Nuggets championship window is right now. If they want to have Aaron Gordon part of that championship window is going to be closing fast, I think.
Yeah, and again, not to mention, they just have a lot of completeness of their roster. Now, also losing Paul Millsap does hurt a little bit in terms of the defense, but Denver has always kind of been a defense by committee sort of team. So, yes, it will suck losing Paul Millsap, but they do get the offensive upset that Jeff Green does provide them because he is a better offensive player at this stage in his career. And then, you have the MVP in Nikola Jokic. And Jokic has already shown that he can carry a team. It's just about how far can he carry you. That's yet to be seen. But I think in terms of the regular season, they'll still be good enough to have a top 5 seed in the Western Conference.
Yeah, speaking of the top 5, to round out our top 5 in the Western Conference, at the 5th seed, we have the Los Angeles Clippers finishing with around 50 to 54 wins. Now, basically, the Clippers have also came into this season with primarily the same team. The one major change they had was swapping out Patrick Beverley for Eric Bledsoe. Now, there was a couple trades in the middle, but basically that was what they did. They got Eric Bledsoe in for Patrick Beverley. However, the rest of the team is the same. Now, that move, it can be questioned. A lot of people questioned as to why they did it. Again, I don't completely know, but, they
wanted some playoff Bledsoe. That's what they wanted.
Listen, man, the offensive upside of Eric Bledsoe is higher than Patrick Beverley, but it can be argued that Patrick Beverley in his role would probably be a better offensive player than Eric Bledsoe on the Clippers.
What are their roles on the Clippers? Like offensive roles? Like you have Kawhi and Paul George.
Well, Patrick Beverley would shoot threes. Eric Bledsoe, we know, can't really do that, so that will be a question. Good thing is they have Reggie Jackson, who officially balled out last season and is looking more like the Reggie Jackson who was in his first year of Detroit.
OKC. Or even OKC.
Even more, OKC. Like I said, they're still a very good team, but the main biggest difference was that they're going to be missing Kawhi Leonard for at least the first chunk of the season with an ACL injury similar to Jamal Murray. So this team, they're going to definitely take a step down with their best player missing, obviously. But they still should be a very good team. They still should be a top 15 offense and defense, especially led by a coach in Tyronn Lue, who's a very good regular season coach. Now, he has his issues in the playoffs, and those are well documented. However, in the regular season, he's still able to get great production from his teams. My final point about the Clippers is that, maybe they won't be looked at as a top team this year. But one thing to look at for the Clippers is Paul George and his MVP case, possibly. With Kawhi Leonard missing and the way Paul George finished last season looking more like his Indiana self than we have seen in a long time, Paul George could legitimately have a chance at winning an MVP for the first time since his OKC days, where he finished top 3 in MVP voting. And with Kawhi Leonard not being there anymore, he'll be asked to take a lot of the shots and carry a lot of the offense and defense. So I think, bettors out there, Paul George is not a bad choice for winning MVP.
I mean, again, the thing with the Clippers is they really didn't improve. And when you're losing a guy like Kawhi Leonard to injury, Kawhi's not an easy guy to lose. And trust me, we know he's not an easy guy to replace. But Paul George, again, definitely improved. Obviously, I still love Way Off P and all those nicknames that come with it. But he definitely had a much better season last year and a much better showing in the playoffs, especially when the Clippers needed him when Kawhi went down with injury. So it's not a bad prediction to make. To think Paul George can have an MVP case this next season. But I think a player that I think we're all really forgetting about is Serge Ibaka. Ibaka was on this team, but he was plagued with injury. Then before that, when he was with the Raptors, I mean, we saw how productive he was in terms of, being a two-way center. He's not only still a good defensive defender, but he's also, has developed his shooting and developed his offensive game now. To the point
he can take more than 2 dribbles now.
He can take more than 2 dribbles now. Yes, we did that for you. You're welcome, Steve Ballmer. But, adding Serge, giving him more opportunities to score and become acclimated in the system, I think will be great for them. And then again, it's the same team, it's the same concept we've been kind of saying with a lot of these teams, is that they have that continuity. Tyronn Lue is going to have another year with that system. So that the growth that's going to come from that, I think will be much needed for the Clippers. But again, losing Kawhi Leonard does hurt, so that's why we're going to have to drop him to the 5 seed. But again, the Clippers were kind of designed for the playoffs anyways. They were never designed for the regular season.
Well, the thing about, like you said, losing Kawhi Leonard is still a big loss, but the good thing about the Clippers is that with load management, they've kind of already played a lot of games without Kawhi Leonard, right? To tell you the truth. So, it'll still be a big loss, but I think it'll be a loss that the Clippers can still manage.
Yeah, for sure. Which brings us into the 6th seed in the Western Conference, and our prediction is it's going to be the Golden State Warriors. So the Golden State Warriors, we're predicting about a 45 to 50 win season for them. Now, last year they finished as the 9th seed. Now, obviously, they got knocked out of the play-in by LeBron and the Lakers, and as well as the Memphis Grizzlies, who put up an amazing fight to earn that 8th seed. So I will give them credit for that one. But I think the key for the Warriors is they are finally going to be healthy coming into this season. With Clay coming back from his injury, Draymond has also had basically last year to kind of, rest and recover. And Steph Curry obviously having a great year last year. The Warriors are finally healthy. Their big 3, their core guys are finally healthy again. And, this is the first time we've seen all 3 of them healthy since 2019. It's been 2 years. So the fact that now these guys are coming back, we know how great they are together. It only improves their odds of improving their win totals from previous seasons. But they also have great young talent on this team. Like, obviously, over the years they've developed some players. They drafted James Wiseman last year. They even drafted Jonathan Kuminga in this past draft, who actually had a great showing in Summer League. Moses Moody, they have some decent players as well. But I think the big thing is now they have another year with Andrew Wiggins in the system. Now, Andrew Wiggins was kind of that player who, the Warriors were considering, and they're still considering using him as a trade chip. But at the same time, his upside for them, especially him improving his defense, improving his shooting, definitely makes him a useful player for the Warriors. Like we always said, Andrew Wiggins has a lot of talent, but he was never, a number 1 guy, number 2 guy. He always can be a 3rd or a 4th option. And for the Warriors, that's perfect. That's exactly what they need out of them, man. And the fact that now he has another year to come back and adapt, and even another guy like James Wiseman, I can kind of lump into that, where he can now come in and develop a little bit more and become that number one center that the Warriors wants him to be. There's a lot of good things with this Warriors team. Then obviously Steve Kerr's coaching, and the Warriors are just gonna come back and be that model of consistency that we've expected out of them over the last few years before last year, man. And then they also added some good vets. Like they brought back Andre Iguodala, because why not? But I like the Otto Porter signing as well for their bench.
Yeah, man, it's a low risk, high reward move for them. I think, like you said, James Wiseman especially will benefit with another year, especially since last year he didn't have any training camp or nothing with obviously the COVID situation. And so now him having another year in the system, which is a very complicated system to learn, especially for a young player like James Wiseman, who essentially came out of high school with no experience, with no training camp. So people who were killing him last year, I think should, he definitely deserves some, to be cut some slack. This guy didn't play basketball for like 2 years basically, and he came into a Warriors system. But again, now he won't be asked to do as much as he was last year with Steph Curry coming back more healthy, Klay Thompson hopefully being able to play now, and then Draymond Green getting another offseason of rest under his knees. Andrew Wiggins, I think, will be the most interesting one because of the fact that now he's found a more suitable role for himself in Golden State, functioning as basically the Harrison Barnes of this team. Right? Harrison Barnes was previously on the Golden State Warriors, and he functioned as a 3-and-D type of guy who could occasionally make rim runs and attack the paint and dunk on people, which is exactly what Andrew Wiggins can do as well. So I think Andrew Wiggins will be the interesting one. Like you said, this is still the Golden State Warriors with Steve Kerr's system. The only difference is now hopefully we'll be able to see them as a healthy team, and they should be able to make the playoffs now as a result.
Like you have 2 of the top 10 players in the league in Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. If these guys are healthy and are back to their normal selves, they are going to win a lot of games. Now, again, the top of the Western Conference is definitely stacked, and I think definitely the acclimation of especially bringing guys like Klay Thompson back into game shape is going to take some time. So that's why we have them lower in the standings, but definitely going to be a playoff team next year, and they're going to be a lot better.
Yeah, moving on to the 7th seed, we have the Dallas Mavericks finishing with around 45 to 50 wins. Now, the Dallas Mavericks last year finished as the 5th seed in the Western Conference, and they basically brought back the exact same team this year. The reason why, like you said, we're putting them lower, similar to Golden State, is just because the Western Conference got so much better, right? From last year to this year, especially with the Golden State Warriors now being there, and we have to factor that in.
Well, that's the only jump from what the Mavs were. Like, the Mavs were the 5 seed last year.
Exactly. So the Mavericks came back this year with primarily the exact same team. The thing is, for them, they'll have Luka Doncic, who will likely be an MVP candidate, and he's going to be able to push the Mavericks through this regular season just with his overall brilliance as a whole. And then you have, I was going to say Rick Carlisle. You don't have Rick Carlisle anymore. You have Jason Kidd, who I think sucks as a coach, in all honesty. But, we'll see Luka Doncic ball out again, and we know Luka Doncic is definitely able to carry his team to the playoffs. The one main question for the Dallas Mavericks will be Kristaps Porzingis. Is he even going to play? When he does play, is he going to be good? What kind of role will he have in this new Jason Kidd system? Because if there's one valid thing I can say about Kristaps Porzingis is that he was not used correctly in Rick Carlisle's offense. No matter what you want to say about him stinking, like Porzingis wasn't good by any stretch, but he was not utilized correctly either. And we've seen how much better players play when they're actually utilized properly. So I think that'll be an interesting thing is, number one, if he's actually on the court this year. Number two, how good is he going to be and how will his chemistry with Luka Doncic be? And then number three, how is he going to fit into this new system? I think that's going to be the biggest what-if scenario or biggest question for the Dallas Mavericks in terms of where they are or where we're predicting them or what their ceiling can actually be as, for example, a top 5 seed.
Yeah, I think obviously you kind of nailed it in the sense that Luka is going to be Luka. And we saw in the Olympics, Luka Doncic is fantastic. He's going to be an MVP candidate this upcoming season. And he's not the problem with this team. And even like bringing back guys like Tim Hardaway Jr., smart move because he's had his career years in Dallas. Even going out and signing a guy like Reggie Bullock is another decent under the radar signing. Obviously you have the GOAT Boban, but that's besides the point. The main question for this Mavs team is, can Jason Kidd coach? Because so far the jury's still out on that one because we don't know. The last time we saw him being a head coach, it was not great. And, obviously he was an assistant. Maybe he learned some things. But Jason Kidd, can he coach? That's the big thing. The second thing is Kristaps Porzingis. Before he was traded to Dallas, he was looking at like one of the best young players in the league. Obviously Rick Carlisle didn't make the best use out of Kristaps Porzingis, but Kristaps Porzingis, his health, his development and skill set has diminished. And I think he needs to regain some of that if he wants to be that number 2 guy for Luka Doncic.
Well, in terms of Kristaps Porzingis' skill, I don't even think necessarily that he's just gone worse. I think it's just that he's gone so afraid of being injured that his game has taken a decline as a result. And I mean, I can't really blame him because of that. We know the history of 7-foot big men and what happens to them as they go on in their career. And then obviously after their career, it really sucks for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just a question mark on can he rediscover what he had in New York? At least like 80%, 85% of that I think will be so beneficial for Luka and the Mavs. But yeah, like you said, some of the teams in the Western Conference have gotten better, and that kind of bumped the Mavs a little down. So they can still make it to the playoffs if they make the play-in, but that all depends on how things go with Jason Kidd and Kristaps Porzingis. Which brings us into our prediction for the 8th seed for the Western Conference, and we think it's going to be the Portland Trailblazers. About 40 to 45 wins is our prediction. Last year they finished with the 6th seed. To be honest with you, the Portland Trailblazers is the one team out of the top of the playoff teams that we're mentioning that honestly got worse this season. They didn't necessarily get better. They lost a lot of key players. They lost Carmelo Anthony. They lost Derrick Jones Jr. They lost Enes Kanter. These guys were consistent players for them.
Well, Carmelo and Enes Kanter more so than Derrick Jones Jr.
But they still lost players like that played a role for them. And other than that, it's pretty much the same team as last year. It's pretty much the same team as last year, except not as good. We're talking about who do they add? They added Larry Nance Jr., Cody Zeller, the GOAT Tony Snell,
Ben
McLemore, and that's pretty much it. So you lose the scoring from Carmelo Anthony and Enes Kanter, and the rebounding from Enes Kanter, and you didn't really do a good job to replace that. Not to mention all the noise surrounding Damian Lillard and his unhappiness with the front office right now. It's not a lot of great things happening in Portland right now, But I guess the one silver lining to look at this Portland team is they will have another year to build chemistry. Obviously, going out and training for Norman Powell at the trade deadline didn't give them a lot of time to kind of acclimate him. So I think now that you're getting some time, bringing Norman, CJ, and Dame, that might be able to work. And now Norman will get more opportunities because Melo wasn't out there taking some shots away. That might be the best thing, but really it comes down to the only reason why we're predicting them to be the 8th seed is because they have Damian Lillard. It's about it, pretty much.
And for a guy that's been in the news for possibly, being traded, Portland has not done a good job convincing him to stay.
Not at all.
When we talk about Portland, doing the exact same thing over and over and over again every single season, this is literally what happened this season, except instead of doing that, they got even worse, to be honest. Right? And Portland, at this point, like we've mentioned it numerous times, I think a lot of other people have mentioned it. You're at the point where the Raptors were a couple years ago, except the Raptors were a lot better. You can't just keep doing the same thing over and over again and then hoping for a different result. It's not going to happen. And you're basically wasting the prime of a guy like Damian Lillard.
Well, they did fire their coach. I didn't even mention that they did hire Chauncey Billups, and I think Chauncey will definitely come in and make an impact for them. But again, roster-wise, they didn't. It's like the 2018 Raptors. They need to make a change on their roster, and again, the Raptors didn't have anyone nearly as talented as Damian Lillard on their team, and that's the difference.
Well, also the difference between those two is that the Raptors at least had a little bit of options. The Portland Trailblazers basically have no options aside from trading CJ McCollum. And, how high is CJ McCollum's trade value? We don't know, right? So the Portland Trailblazers are basically kind of stuck. And as a result, they got worse this season. And, they'll still be good enough, I think, to get to that 8th seed. But other than that, nobody sees them doing much else. One thing I also have to mention before we move on to the 9th seed is the fact that there is the play-in tournament. So we're predicting these seedings based on win totals. However, based on the play-in tournament, a team like the Portland Trailblazers or the Dallas Mavericks, for example, could get knocked out from 1 or 2 games, right? So that's one thing to factor in as well. Moving on to the 9th seed, we have the Memphis Grizzlies, finishing with around 40 to 45 wins. I think that might be a bit generous as well. They're, again, mostly the same team as well, with the exception of the fact that they traded they traded Jonas Valanciunas for Steven Adams. A move that's being questioned a lot, even by us. I still don't really know why they did it. They also traded away a guy like Grayson Allen, which was very head-scratching considering how good he was for them, and to trade him away for nothing was very puzzling. The Memphis Grizzlies are still a young team who will be very competitive based on, for example, guys like Ja Morant, Dylan Brooks, Brandon Clark, Jaren Jackson. The list goes on. They have a number of young players who will keep them competitive, but they're just not ready yet at this point yet. They're not there yet. I think a lot of their success will depend on a guy like Jaren Jackson Jr. If he's healthy and how good he'll be. He hasn't taken the jump yet that many people had expected him to take, and that's in large part due to his health. But it remains to be seen if he'll finally have a breakout season and how much he'll be able to contribute to this Memphis team. And as a result, how much more will they win as a result of Jaren Jackson Jr.'s production?
Yeah, I mean, again, anyone who's listening to the show knows that, I love Ja Morant, and I think he's such a fantastic young player. And then Memphis has done a great job just building around him, just bringing in some nice, talented young players. Like Dylan Brooks had a really good year last year. But again, you're right, Brandon Clark is another one of those good players. But again, they need a guy like Jaren Jackson Jr. to take that next step. Like Ja Morant's already taken that step in terms of his development as a player. But Jaren Jackson Jr. needs to either keep up or surpass what Ja Morant was doing, because these guys are way too talented, and the Western Conference is too stacked for them to not be competitive in that regard. Now they're gonna be the scrappy team. Obviously, Taylor Jenkins has done a fantastic job in coaching these guys up. Still surprising he came from the Budenholzer tree, but the Memphis Grizzlies they're kind of where they are right now. They're still waiting on that growth, and they're not at that level yet. They're not ready yet, which is the best way to describe them.
Moving on to another young team. For our 10th seed, we have the Houston Rockets finishing with around 36 to 40 wins. Now, they have on paper at least, they have a good handful of players. Their team looks very talented. However, if you analyze it a bit more, the rest of their team is kind of suspect or a bit trash. They're gonna be, led by primarily John Wall and Eric Gordon, if he's there, at least at the end of the season, in the locker room. Those two are going to be looked to lead this team because, like I said, the rest of this team is very young. But they do have some great talent with Jalen Green, Josh Christopher, Alperen Sengun, Kevin Porter Jr., Kenyon Martin Jr., Jayshawn Tate, my guy Christian Wood. It's been a while since I said his name, but
we have to bring him back.
My guy Christian Wood. Like I said, all of these names are very talented names. They have a very talent-filled team, and Houston, as a result, looks very promising in the future. Right now, however, these guys are mostly, third-year players and under, and they're not really going to win many games as a result. They'll make things competitive. They'll make things definitely fun. I think they're definitely going to be one of the most watched teams in the league.
Yeah. But
in terms of winning anything right now, probably not going to happen.
I think Jalen Green kind of established in summer league that he is must watch. Like the guy is gonna put butts in the seats. But I think the things that we need to see out of the Rockets is growth. Obviously they have talent, but again, it's a lot of young talent as you just mentioned. And John Wall and Eric Gordon, they're there for now, but how long do we see them being there? Especially in the case of Eric Gordon, who I 100% expect to be gone by the trade deadline.
Well, I mean, he basically didn't even play last year, so.
Pretty much. And like John Wall, even if they find a way to trade him, they're going to probably trade him too because he doesn't fit their timelines right now. And again, I still like John Wall, and I still think John Wall can still contribute. And I think that's the reason why we have them as the 10th seed is because with these veteran guys, mixed with the talent of the young talent, these guys can win some games. Now, they're not good enough to compete with the upper echelon of the West, but they're still going to be able to put some wins together. So they're definitely going to be a fun team to watch. But again, it's still a young team that needs time to grow. Which brings us into another team who again, sadly, like they're in a full-fledged rebuild now. It's the San Antonio Spurs. We're predicting about 32 to 35 wins, and this is a rebuilding year for the Spurs. Obviously, their goal is to focus on developing the young guys with losing letting go of DeMar DeRozan, letting go of, and obviously LaMarcus Aldridge left the year prior. Rudy Gay, like they really unloaded a lot of their veteran guys, and they really want to focus on developing their key young players like DeJounte Murray, Lonnie Walker, Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell, Derek White, they brought back Bryn Forbes. They did. Oh. They brought back Bryn Forbes. So obviously the Spurs, they want to develop these guys. They want to give these guys more opportunities. But they still have, Greg Popovich as their head coach. Now, how long is he going to be coaching for? That's yet to be seen. Personally, I think he has maybe a couple more years left, and then he's gonna be like, yeah, I'm done with this. But they also have some good vets in Thaddeus Young, Al-Farouq Aminu. These guys can lead their young team. And again, because of the Spurs, because they have that system put in place, they're going to be able to win some games. But the talent level has definitely decreased in San Antonio to the point where they're no longer the dynasty. And obviously, they weren't the dynasty for a while now, but now it's officially they're no longer a competitive team in the West.
Yeah, man, legit. For us, I think the only reason why we put them as high as we did is just because of Greg Popovich and the fact that it's the San Antonio Spurs, right? They are still going to be very competitive, and they're still going to win some games, but in terms of this team on paper, it's not looking too great. Yeah. Again, it's all good for Spurs fans, man. You've had arguably the greatest dynasty
championships
the NBA has seen since maybe the 60s Boston Celtics, in all honesty. 20 years of sustained excellence is very hard to come on.
They're the model of consistency in the modern era. I think that's the best thing we can describe them.
At the 12th seed, yeah. Yeah,
which brings us to the 12th seed. And we're going to talk about the Sacramento Kings here. And we're predicting about, again, 32 to 35 wins. Does anyone know what Sacramento's doing?
Nope.
I don't.
Kings fans, I think, are I feel sorry for them the most.
We have to.
And listen, man, they're like some of the most loyal fans you've ever seen. That's how you know you have a good fan base, because of the fact that they haven't made the playoffs in, I think, forever. And yet their fans are still as loyal as they are. So major respect to Kings fans. They're definitely one of the best fan bases in the league. And they are the only thing that's actually good about the Sacramento Kings, besides, Sacramento's couple of good players.
Now obviously Sacramento has been interested in some making a splash, maybe going after a Ben Simmons. But this is the same team as last year. Besides, they added Tristan Thompson because
be gone.
They're gonna either flip him or something. Like they're not gonna keep him on the team for long. Again, it's the same team as last year. Obviously, De'Aaron Fox is gonna get better. They tried to trade Buddy Hield, but that clearly fell through at some point. So I feel like Buddy Hield is gonna be dealt at some point in time because I don't think he's happy. They have Harrison Barnes, and they're paying him $20 million a season, which, again, who is his agent?
Bro, his agent is him and Gordon Hayward. Oh, and Chandler Parsons in recent memory. Their agents are goated.
Yeah, absolutely, bro.
Unless they have one agent or whatever. I don't know. Whoever their agents are, they're goated.
Absolutely, man. The fact that these guys are getting paid the amount of money they are is insane. But Harrison Barnes is still on the team. Obviously, we don't really know the situation with Marvin Bagley. He was hurt last season, but he wasn't really having a great year in general. So, can he turn it around? He's still young enough to do so, but we really don't know his situation. They re-signed Richaun Holmes, which, again, Richaun Holmes is a solid player.
He was a good player for them.
We
wanted him on the Raps, but...
Yeah, but, we went for Kem Birch because he was a lot cheaper, and frankly, he's a lot more talented. But I think the biggest thing with this Kings team, the only thing that you can really look forward to is the young talent on this team. Obviously last year with Tyrese Halliburton, we praised him a lot last year with his level of play. Just him not looking like a rookie in his first season was very impressive for us. Then they also drafted Davion Mitchell, and we saw in Summer League, the guy won Summer League MVP, and he led the Kings to the Summer League championship, which is the closest the Kings have ever were going to get to the championship.
Hey, at least the Kings can say they're the best Summer League team in history.
Sure, why not? They can call themselves that. But again, other than that, what direction are the Kings really going in? We really don't know what's their future. Is the future De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Halliburton? Is it these guys, or are they gonna flip Buddy Hield? Are they gonna try to make a play at Ben Simmons? We really don't know what they're trying to do right now, and that's kind of why the Kings are stuck in the mediocrity that they've been in for the last few years.
More like last 15 years.
Sure, why not? But for recency's sake, the last few years.
Yeah, so the Sacramento Kings suck.
Pretty much.
At the 13th seed, we had the Minnesota Timberwolves finishing with around 30 to 34 wins. Now, the Minnesota Timberwolves have a couple of talented players: Karl-Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards, Naz Reid, Malik Beasley, D'Angelo Russell. They have some, great talents on paper. They've also tried, I will give credit, they've tried addressing some of their defensive issues. They have a couple of decent defensive players now on the roster. They acquired Patrick Beverley. They brought back Ricky Rubio. And then they also have their young guys in Naz Reid, Josh Okogie, and Jaden McDaniels, who are all pretty solid defenders as well. The issue is the rest of this team is trash, and they're just not good at all. Now, they had some potential last year. I would say they showed some flashes when all of their guys were healthy, that they could at least keep things competitive. But I think that's the extent of what you're going to get for Minnesota this year. Maybe they'll be competitive enough to make a push for an 8th seed or something on the high end, but they're not going to do anything more than that. And most likely they will be a bottom 6 team in the league. And I guess the only question now for Minnesota is if and when will Karl-Anthony Towns ask out?
Yeah, I really don't know what to think with Minnesota anymore. It's just they have so much talent on paper, and you think they would be able to put it together, especially with a guy as talented as him. They just haven't, man. And again, I love what Anthony Edwards did last year. He got progressively better, as I expected him to.
Shout out Chris Finch,
man. He really unlocked Anthony Edwards. But again, we're talking about, he should have won Rookie of the Year, by the way. But again, we're talking about a team that is full of talented young players, but have just never been able to put it together. And I think that's kind of where we're at now with Minnesota.
And I will say, that brings one more point I have to say about the Minnesota Timberwolves. This is why fans should not encourage tanking all the time. Because roster building is a lot more than just getting good draft picks and even nailing those draft picks. The Minnesota Timberwolves have nailed some of their draft picks. Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns have been good draft picks. And Andrew Wiggins, even if he can be considered a bust, was still a good draft pick in retrospect.
It wasn't even their pick. It was Cleveland's. They traded
exactly. For him. And, they haven't done bad in terms of the draft. The issue is that roster building is a lot more than just having a couple of good young players. There's a lot more that goes into roster building. And the Minnesota Timberwolves, I think, are a prime example of not succeeding in the roster building phase.
Yeah. So, and speaking of another team that really has a lot of questions in terms of roster building, we're talking about the New Orleans Pelicans, who were predicting to be the 14th seed in the Western Conference, but 28 to 32 wins is our prediction. Obviously, they have Zion Williamson, who, again, is charismatic, has a lot of flashy dunks, but can this guy stay healthy, and can this guy play an entire season? What else can Zion Williamson do?
Can he improve his defense? What position can he play? On a consistent level? Because right now, is he power forward? Is he a center? Is he a small? Because he's undersized for a lot of positions that he's currently playing in. What is Zion Williamson? I don't think we know that yet. I don't think he's been properly developed yet. They have Brandon Ingram. Brandon Ingram, he does his thing. He's kind of what he is now, which is a very good player. He was all-star
caliber player. But that's about it. What else do the Pelicans really have? They obviously lost Lonzo Ball now. They got Devontae Graham, who again might be able to do some solid things offensively, but defensively he's gonna be a liability. Josh Hart, okay,
they got JV.
They got JV, but how does he fit with Zion Williamson? And this is what I'm saying. The question marks with New Orleans are just becoming more and more apparent. And then they also just got a new coach after last season, also getting a new coach in Stan Van Gundy. So the lack of consistency, the lack of development, the lack of direction is just what are these Pelicans? And I think they should explore trading Brandon Ingram because I think his value is pretty high. But you gotta pick who you're building on. Are you building on Zion or are you building on Brandon Ingram? Because these guys, they're good individual players, but I think together they don't really work. They have different styles. So
yeah, man. New Orleans is just in a weird phase right now. which is interesting because a couple of years ago, especially I'd say maybe last year, they were looked at as like the team of the future. But, one season can change a lot. They replaced Lonzo Ball with Devontae Graham. Interesting pickup. Hopefully he can be more of what he was a couple of years ago. But again, they're just not a very good team overall. And that brings us to the number 15 seed, the OKC Thunder. It's primarily, we have them finishing with like 25 to 29 wins, maybe even lower, to be honest. It's just another rebuild year for them. Just completely, just add on more draft picks to war chest for Sam Presti. And, they have a great player in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
Who they locked up, by the way.
Yeah, they have another great player in Lou Dort. Shout out to, Canada basketball for both of these guys. Other than that, they're pretty trash, basically. I mean, they have a couple of young players. Alexei Pokusevsky is very interesting. He might be another one of those 7-foot guys that can do everything on the court. They have, Theo Maledon was great for them as well. They have a couple of nice young pieces.
They drafted Josh Giddey.
Yeah, they have a couple of nice young pieces, but overall this team is
trash. This is a very funny team because they're literally paying nobody this season. They have like $50 million, $30 million of cap space. And
they're
they
just
have
on a tankathon.
Pretty much, but they have like 35 picks over the next 8 years. Sam Presti does not care about winning for the next few years. But yeah, those were our predictions for the 2021-2022 Western Conference. Let us know what you guys think. Do you agree or disagree? Either on social media or the comment section on YouTube. Which brings us into a very short up and under segment for this week. First off and last off, are you up or under on the Lakers trading Marc Gasol and a 2024 second round pick and cash consideration to the Memphis Grizzlies for the draft rights to Wang Zalen? That's pretty much it. And Marc Gasol is basically going to be released by the Memphis Grizzlies and stay with his family in Spain.
I'm up on it. The Lakers need to get rid of Marc Gasol.
We kind of called that in the last episode.
Yeah, he was not good for them. They just got DeAndre Jordan. There's no point of keeping Marc Gasol on the roster. Not to mention, I think this might be the end for Marc Gasol in the NBA, which is all good, man. He's had a great career. So shout out Marc Gasol. He won a ring for us in Toronto. So he had, I think, even if his last season was not great, he had a great ending to a great career.
And he got to retire with Memphis. He gets to end his career with Memphis, which is...
again, if he ends his career, which it's looking like he might.
Yeah.
Considering the fact that he's going to stay with his family in Spain, which is all good, man. He's getting up there in age, and it's a trade that works for both sides.
Olympic medals, NBA championship, defensive player of the year, all multiple time All-Star,
Hall of Famer.
Marc Gasol's a guaranteed Hall of Famer. Him and his brother Powell, Hall of Famers, man.
Best brother duo in NBA history for sure.
Absolutely. With that concludes this week's episode. We hope you guys enjoyed it. Definitely subscribe to the show on all the various platforms. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, YouTube, basically wherever you can find a podcast. You can find us with the Up and Under Podcast. Also, follow us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at UP_Podcast, Facebook.com/Up and Under Podcast for all the latest episodes. Whenever we post a new episode or reaction to news as they occur. So definitely check that out if you haven't done so. Also, check out our website, UpandUnderPodcast.com. It's a central hub for the show. It's a place where we write blog posts about every single episode. So if you don't have time to listen or watch the full episode, you can read about it on our website. So definitely check that out if you haven't done so. Yeah, man. Stay tuned for our Eastern Conference predictions. Going to be coming up real soon. And maybe a couple more off-season topics before we get into the next season. But yeah, man. With that concludes this week's episode. We see you guys on the next one. Take it easy.